Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a concept that sits right in that mysterious space between heaven and hell, a sort of spiritual waiting room that has captivated theologians, poets, and believers for centuries: purgatory. You've probably used the word yourself, right? Maybe you're waiting on a text back, or your new website is buried so deep in search results it's stuck in Google Purgatory. We use it all the time to describe that feeling of being in limbo, just waiting. But that casual use actually comes from a really profound theological idea. It's the answer to a question that people have asked forever. If you die as a good person, but you're not, perfect, where do you go? So let's really dig into what purgatory originally meant. To really get a handle on purgatory, we have to start with its most basic function as this spiritual in-between state. So in Catholic teaching, purgatory is absolutely not a second chance, and it's definitely not a kind of hell light. The name itself gives us the biggest clue. It comes from the Latin word purga, which means to purify. The whole point is that it's a state of cleansing for souls that are already saved, already on their way to heaven, but just aren't quite ready to stand in the full, pure presence of God. And this right here, this clears up the single biggest misunderstanding about purgatory. See, hell is about eternal punishment. It's final. It's separation from God forever. Purgatory, on the other hand, is all about temporary purification. And here's the key: it has a guaranteed final destination, and that destination is heaven. The purpose is just completely different. A really helpful way to think about this is the old analogy of a goldsmith. To get pure gold, you have to heat it in a furnace, right? The fire burns away all the impurities, the junk, the dross, to reveal that pure, shining metal underneath. The whole point isn't to destroy the gold, it's to perfect it. And that's exactly how theologians see the purpose of purgatory. Okay, but why is this purification even necessary? Well, theology points to a few key reasons. First, you've got what are called venial sins, those minor faults that maybe you never dealt with, things that kind of soil the soul. Then there's this idea of temporal punishment, which is like a spiritual consequence that still needs to be paid even after a sin has been forgiven. And finally, there's any unhealthy attachment to worldly things that needs to be cleansed. But the ultimate reason comes straight from the Bible, from the book of Revelation. Nothing impure can enter into the presence of a perfectly holy God. So where did this whole idea come from? I mean, it didn't just appear out of nowhere. It actually has this long, fascinating history that builds on some really ancient roots before it ever became a formal doctrine. You can trace the breadcrumbs way back, even before Christianity, to Jewish traditions of praying for the dead, which we see in the Book of 2 Maccabees. Then, early Christian thinkers like Tertullian and St. Augustine started writing about a kind of cleansing process after death. But get this, the actual word purgatorium doesn't even show up until the 12th century. And from there, the idea really starts to solidify, eventually becoming formal church teaching at the big councils of Lyon and later Trent. And this quote right here from 2 Maccabees is really the cornerstone. It says, flat out, that praying for the dead is a holy and wholesome thought to help them be loosed from sins. For anyone who believes in purgatory, this is like Exhibit A, a clear scriptural basis for the idea that what we do here on earth can actually help those who have passed on. Okay, so we've got the what and the why, but what does purgatory actually feel like? Is it a physical place? Is there actual fire? This is where official theology and the popular imagination really start to wrestle with each other. So here's what might be surprising. The official modern Catholic teaching, spelled out by popes like John Paul II, is that purgatory is not a place. It's not some location on a map of the afterlife. It's a condition of existence, an internal process of transformation that a soul goes through. But that abstract idea has always had to compete with this incredibly powerful image. I'm talking about the poet Dante. In his masterpiece, The Divine Comedy, he imagined purgatory as this enormous mountain. Souls have to climb its 7 levels, and each level purges them of one of the 7 deadly sins until they finally reach the Garden of Eden at the very top. I mean, that vision has shaped how people picture purgatory for centuries. And that, of course, brings us to the most famous image of all: fire. If the church doesn't officially teach that purgatory is a fiery pit, then where in the world did we get that powerful idea? It really comes down to interpretation. Early church fathers, they were reading passages in the Bible, like one from St. Paul, that talks about a person being saved, but only as through fire. And they looked at that and thought, aha, this must be talking about a purifying fire after death. So that image of a cleansing fire became the dominant way people thought about the suffering involved. But check out this totally different and, honestly, fascinating take from the mystic St. Catherine of Genoa. She saw the fire not as some punishment coming from the outside, but as an internal fire. It's the soul's own intense, burning love for God, mixed with the incredible pain of seeing its own flaws. And in her view, the soul actually wants this. It willingly throws itself into that state to be made pure. Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand that this whole doctrine of purgatory is not a universal Christian belief, not even close. So let's take a look at how other major traditions see this in-between state. So while Catholics have this clearly defined doctrine of purgatory, the Eastern Orthodox Church also believes in an intermediate state, and that prayers for the dead can help. They just don't usually use the word purgatory and see it more as a process of spiritual growth. Protestant views, though, are all over the map, but for the most part, the doctrine was rejected during the Reformation. And that rejection was pretty forceful. The Reformers basically argued that the idea wasn't explicitly in the Bible, and that it seemed to undermine what Christ did on the cross. This Anglican article calls the Catholic or Romish doctrine a fond thing, which back then meant a foolish thing, that was vainly invented. It just goes to show you how deep that theological split really was. So in the end, whether you believe in the doctrine or not, the whole idea of purgatory touches on some of our deepest human questions about life and death. It forces us to think, and it really leaves us with this final thought. Beyond any one religion, what does the very concept of a final purification, a chance to be made whole and ready, say about our deepest hopes for justice, for mercy, and for the ultimate possibility of transformation? It's a powerful idea to sit with.